There's a couple exciting Nintendo Switch stories we have to talk about today, starting with a conversation around Nintendo Switch sales in the year of 2022. As you may remember, in January, their closed out sales were actually quite a bit lower compared to the competition than they typically were, and we now have a different story to tell in the month of February. Then the big talking point for today's video has to do with E3 2022, and while there was a lot of conflicting information and potentially seeing reports of this event being canceled altogether, it is now all but confirmed that this event will be taking place this year, and we have to have a discussion around what this means for Nintendo's direct presentation at E3 2022. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. As I mentioned, guys, we got a couple exciting stories to discuss today, and we have to kick it off with a conversation around Nintendo Switch sales, as we are now clearly 5 years into the life cycle of the Nintendo Switch, which is very hard to believe. And while we don't have a more powerful hardware revision, we do have a family of consoles now between the Switch Lite, the base model Switch, and the Nintendo Switch OLED most recently, and by all accounts the steam for this thing is not running out. As you may remember, last month on the channel we had a discussion of Nintendo dipping down in their total hardware sales and not being the leader compared to Sony and Microsoft like they typically do, at least in total unit sales, if not both total unit and dollar sales, and that was a surprising factor. However, we also had the discussion that it may have just been more of a hardware supply issue, and in fact it does appear that that's more of the case of what caused that dip down in sales, as it's kind of a crazy environment here in 2022. But really, whoever leads the pack in a month in or month out sales units right now really falls down to who can produce the most hardware to sell and get on the retail shelves. And it does look like Nintendo was able to ramp up their production in comparison to January, as they are now back on top in terms of total unit sales and dollar sales for the month of February. And to kick off this conversation, I do want to hop over to Nintendo Everything, where they have a brief article typed up with the details. So let's quickly read through that together. February 2022 NPD, Switch leads hardware sales in the US. According to the latest NPD report, Switch was the best-selling hardware platform of February 2022. That goes for both units and dollars. The Xbox Series consoles came in second for both of these measures. PlayStation 5 was in third. Also revealed by the NPD is that the Switch has the highest unit sales for consoles in 2022 thus far. PlayStation 5 is on top in terms of dollar sales. However, it's worth noting that Sony's console is more expensive, which contributes to that amount. Now then, to quickly cover the software sales that went along with that in February 2022, we have Pokemon Legends Arceus sitting at number 1, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the gift that keeps on giving for Nintendo, at number 2, because of course it is, Mario Party Superstars at number 3, Animal Crossing New Horizons at number 4, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate number 5, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl at number 6, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild number 7, Super Mario 3D World 8, Just Dance 2022 9, and New Super Mario Bros. Coming in at 10. Now, when we talk about things like Nintendo Switch hardware sales, a couple points I like to make is, one, Nintendo is competing against technically a next generation version or iteration of consoles, and while Nintendo has historically always done their own thing separate from Sony and Microsoft, and they're not really in direct competition the same way that maybe Nintendo and Sony were back in the day, Nintendo's definitely taken a different approach now. But an interesting point is that you have brand new consoles that for the first time are being available on the market since the end of 2020 versus the Switch console, which has been on the market since 2017, and typically 5 years into a console's life cycle, you see the sales start to dwindle down, and that is just not the case for Nintendo's hardware, as clearly they've struck gold with this hybrid formula, and it also very well could be pacing to be the best-selling home console ever, period, whenever you put it next to systems like the PlayStation 2 that currently have that 140 total million units. And I think that by the time we're talking about putting the bow on the end of Nintendo Switch sales in its life cycle, it could very easily surpass that amount. And I think the thing that guarantees it to get there is if we do see some kind of more powerful hardware revision in some way, shape, or form. Anything like those recent leaks from Nvidia that suggested that, of course, NVN2 is actually a real project right now, and that would be a true successor to the Tegra X1 chipset, and some kind of DLSS support included with that chipset, which may suggest there is a very real possibility of getting a more powerful Switch revision before the end of this thing. We've also had President Shintaro Tobar Furukawa state multiple times that due to the unprecedented success of the Nintendo Switch, not only are they still saying they're in the halfway of their life cycle, but they're also saying that the life cycle can change of a device based off of how successful it is, and that may be what we're seeing unfold with the Switch. That NVN2 NVIDIA leak could also just be whatever the base hardware is for the true next-gen successor, but Nintendo has also been quoted saying that they will not do a true next-generation system unless if it offers a true new unique experience, and if you just make a Switch 2, it doesn't necessarily offer that new unique experience unless they go a different direction with the Switch 2 and they do market it with something brand new and unique gameplay wise. I'm still on the fence personally on whether or not I think we will see a more powerful Switch revision, but I do think it's entirely possible that we see Nintendo really try to extend the life cycle of this hybrid console and this hybrid formula, and then whatever the more powerful revision is, they might have a couple exclusive games, but maybe they make most of their games run across the board better, and you just get the enhancement of DLSS, which is deep learning super sampling, which can make a basically a 1080p image or even lower resolution actually upscale to something like 4K, and we could be talking about Breath of the Wild 2 or future games even past that potentially running in an upscaled 4K resolution, which I think it is time to see that happen. Not to mention the conversation around frame rates, as clearly 60 frames per second is very desirable versus a 30 frames per second scenario. So clearly there's a lot of different directions Nintendo could go here, but I want to hear from you guys personally on what you think this means as we continue to see the Switch lead in total dollars and unit sales, and whether or not you think Nintendo is considering just continuing this Switch hybrid formula for the foreseeable future with something like a more powerful revision around the corner, or if you think that maybe like 2024 is just the year that we get a true successor and we don't see something like the Switch Pro or a more powerful Switch in the meantime. So regardless of where you fall on all this, I want to hear from you in the comments down below on all things Nintendo Switch hardware sales and what you think Nintendo's next generation plans are. Now, the other story we're talking about today is great news if you're a fan of E3 presentations, and specifically Nintendo Direct E3 presentations, as in case if you were unfamiliar, up to this point in time, we had a confirmation that E3 would not be taking place in an in-person format this year, as there was a lot of questions on whether or not this would be the year that they come back to an in-person event, but there was also no confirmation that a digital event would be taking place in its place. So that had a lot of people talking, multiple gaming journalists online, different stories that were popping up suggesting that E3 may indeed be canceled altogether, as clearly there is cost associated being a part of this event, and companies a lot of times now in today's day and age are choosing to do their own thing, such as Sony, as they've entirely broken away from that event for years now, and they just hold their own game showcase as opposed to being part of the marketing of E3. That said, Microsoft and Nintendo and multiple other major game publishers have always shown up at E3 and had some kind of presentation, whether it was in person or whether it was digital, and Nintendo historically every year holds a E3 Nintendo Direct, where we as Nintendo fans expect some of the biggest announcements to come from, as that's kind of the Super Bowl of game announcements, if you will. It is that one event a year where all eyes are glued on the companies and what they're going to unveil, and it kind of feels like a little competition where everybody wants to outdo each other and steal the show and all of the talk online as well. And so I personally was worried on those reports that maybe E3 was a thing of the past, and while you can't argue that companies don't need it the same way that they used to, it is still a very nice thing to have as a gamer and somebody who grew up looking forward to E3 the same way I look forward to Christmas Day. Like, it's literally that kind of celebration for me, and it's an entire week of brand new announcements. Like, I didn't want to see that go away, and so the reason it's in the news today is because apparently the ESRB has started to actually send out emails to developers about this event, and it's all but confirming that it will take place and that they are in the process of aligning who's going to partake in the show and who will be featured in things. And I think that if history shows us anything, Nintendo will show up at this event. But to get on the same page with all the details of what's been put out there, I want to quickly hop over to a tweet from Tom Henderson, as he is a gaming journalist who has gone on record stating that these emails are going out. So let's read through his tweet together. E3 will be an entirely digital event again this year, according to the ESRB, who sent out emails to developers today. I guess this squashes the rumors that they were going to cancel it. I'd be expecting an announcement soon if the ESRB is sending out emails. So clearly this is an indication that the gears are in motion and that the planning phase for E3 to take place is indeed happening, as if you were going to cancel the event entirely and not hold it, you wouldn't be sending out emails to developers to ask them to participate and what their plans were and things. So this is a early indication that it is going to take place in the year of 2022, and we have to talk about what that means for Nintendo's presentation, because as I mentioned, historically they do hold their E3 Direct and it is their blowout event. And if I'm a betting man, Nintendo is here in a big way in 2022. I didn't really see them going to Summer Games Fest, which is kind of the new competitor to E3, but a different formula and format, if you will. And it's Jeff Keighley's project, which I think is also fantastic because we see some big announcements come out of that showcase as well, and it is just a different formula overall, but I still love the feeling of E3, and it all takes place in a similar window. So whether if you're a fan of Summer Games Fest or E3, it's a win at the end of the day regardless. But I do think that Nintendo's formula and format with their direct presentation heavily falls in line more with the E3 style of presentation. They typically even do things like the Nintendo Treehouse, where they focus on detailed gameplay for upcoming projects. I do fully expect this to be the year that we get the blowout presentation for Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. There is a lot of talk online on whether or not that game's getting pushed to 2023 or if it will indeed come out this year. I still think it's most likely to come out this year. I even think that it not being at the February Nintendo Direct is probably a strong indication of that, as Nintendo likes to do that 4, 5, sometimes 6-month marketing ramp up to when a game will actually launch. And I think that if they hold their Direct in June of this year at E3, that is the time window that they give us the title reveal, they give us some gameplay details in their Treehouse presentation, and I think that closes out the show ultimately and has a heavy presence there. And of course, me as a hardcore Zelda fan could not be more hyped for that. So I am very pumped for this event to take place. I do think that it is happening. I also think we're getting probably a lot of surprise reveals besides that. Like, this could easily be the place where they announce something like whatever the new Donkey Kong project that's heavily rumored may be. Let's hope we get some kind of mention of Metroid Prime, whether that be a development update on Metroid Prime 4, which I do think they will give us, and then maybe they say that's not ready to go yet, but we are releasing Metroid Prime 1 remake around the corner. Like, I tend to believe a lot of the sources that have actually put out that information, such as the Donkey Kong project, such as the Metroid Prime remake project. So I think that where there's smoke, there's fire with this stuff, and E3 is definitely the place where you would go over the top and announce a lot of new games and really drive home the message on why you need to own a Nintendo Switch, because Nintendo wants to continue selling this console, as we talked about earlier in the video, and I think they do it with incredible first-party software, as they always have. And I think that E3 being back and being in full effect this year is great news all around. But I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video on your personal thoughts and speculation on whether or not you think Nintendo will show up at E3, or if we're going to get some kind of curveball, and even if E3 does happen, that they're not a part of it this year. I want to hear from you on what games you think we will see featured at the Summer or E3 Direct, because clearly it is the place to have your expectations at least reasonably high. If you look at history, we always get some big announcements out of this summer showcase. So I do look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments down below, regardless of where you fall in your opinions on all the different topics we talked about today, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Make sure you check out yesterday's video if you haven't already, where we discuss a surprise Super Nintendo World theme park announcement and a conversation around why some Nintendo fans were worried that the quality of Nintendo Switch games is dipping. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.